we get really nervous about selling to CTOs or
Mm.
selling to a senior VP, engineering manager. And we start to lose touch with the fact that the most powerful people at enterprise companies are still humans. They're still people. I think about our marketing site as a product that has its own user experience and needs to be managed. If that backstory work has not been done, there is no amount of marketing spin that I can put on the feature
Mm.
to make it valuable
Yeah.
to a user. Like you have to start by identifying a real pain point.
Hey, welcome to the Message Market Fit podcast. I'm your host, Chris Silvestri, and if you're new here, this is a show where I chat with B2B SaaS folks in marketing, product, growth, and founders about how they join the conversation already happening in their customers' minds. We dive deep into their thinking, their systems, and their playbooks to see how they empathize with their audience and speak to them in a way that resonates, so they're compelled to take action. Join us and learn how you too can shape your messaging strategy and write copy that truly resonates and differentiates you. I'm super excited about my guest today, Melanie Crissey. Melanie is a technical product marketing manager at Warp, a company building a revolutionary new terminal application for developers. In this episode, we chat about Melanie's unique career path, her passion for working with developers, and how she uses her technical background to bridge the gap between product and marketing. We also dive into her approach to customer-led growth, the challenges of scaling without losing a company's soul, and her strategies for staying ahead of the curve in the ever-evolving world of developer tools. Let's dive right in. Hello, Melanie. Thank you so much for being here and welcome to the podcast. How are you?
I'm good. Hello, Chris. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's great. Awesome. Thank you so much. Let's dive right in. I have a couple of questions and I'm super interested about your background because I know that you've worked in UX as well. And can you briefly tell for the listeners how you became this technical product marketing manager, which I'm also super interested about the term technical product marketing manager. But yeah, how did you get
Ab-
here?
Absolutely. We can talk about the term and the journey that got me here. But basically, so my name is Melanie Crissey. I'm a product marketing manager, technical product marketing manager. And I started my career in tech working in technical support. So the first 2 years of my career, I was like a live chat customer support agent at a marketing automation company. They taught me how to code on the job. I spent all my time just building websites for people, updating emails, and helping much more senior marketers learn
Hmm.
how to run digital campaigns. And so from that very technical early on background, I ended up jumping to a super small startup. I was employee 6
Mm.
and we served developers and helped them make their websites faster. Towards the end of my time at that company, I was there for about 3.5 years. I started to realize that a lot of the work I was doing, updating people about new features with emails to announce product launches or updating the website with new messaging for new services that we were offering, was work that we would categorize as product marketing. I did not know that product marketing was a discipline back then. I didn't realize that you could have an entire career that this is what you did. But I made a pitch to the team like, hey, I think I'm like a huge part of my work is this thing called product marketing and I'd like to do it. It was that moment, I guess 7.5 years ago, I got into product marketing for the first time. And I've been doing it at pretty technical SaaS companies, B2B ever since. So yeah,
Wow.
that's how I got started.
I loved the first day initiative, like you proposing to get that role, basically, even at the beginning. That's awesome. And I also love this duality. And I speak from the same position. I spent 10 years as a software engineer, but it was a totally different field, industrial automation. But I can understand the duality of the kind of logical brain, more technical brain, and a bit more creative side. So how did you reconcile those two sides of your brain in your career?
Oh my gosh. I feel like I am constantly trying still to
Yeah.
reconcile these parts of my brain. There is a lot of context switching. Even just yesterday, I was like coding out a little microsite for something, very heads down in the code for 30 minutes to an hour, and then having to switch out and do narrative in a long form blog post. That's the constant switch.
Yeah.
But I'm grateful that I found something that I can do where I get to touch on both of those things.
Yeah, yeah. So when it comes to the term technical product marketing manager, do you define it as a bridge between product and marketing, or what else?
Yes. So, like traditionally, the product marketing manager is somebody who sits at that intersection of product and business strategy and marketing. The term technical is something that I really was hesitant to apply to myself for a very long time, but I think it is accurate. And I finally made the plunge.
Maybe.
But basically, there's a subset of people who do product marketing like I do, where we are also highly technical individuals. We either code ourselves, are web developers or engineers of some kind, or we have deep subject matter expertise in a highly technical product. So, for example, I've worked with product marketing managers who are data engineers and they can go really deep to sell a data product because they themselves understand how to manipulate data with coding
Mhm.
and to get awesome results and insights. There are also product marketing managers who have just gotten into it through being an expert in a certain piece of software that they've used for a long time. So I think the difference is I have friends who are product marketing managers, maybe in consumer facing companies. They sell financial products or they are selling like a marketing product or something. They may not apply that
Mm.
technical
Yeah.
clarifier,
Yeah.
but I'm claiming it. I feel like my niche is developer tools, and I've been selling to developers for a long time. So
Nice.
finally slapped that label on there.
Awesome. And how did you develop the coding skill? Where did it come from? Did you start? Did you go to university for coding or what else?
Oh, I absolutely did not go to university for coding.
Uh,
When I was in school, I thought I was studying music and film, and
wow.
business was my safe fallback degree. But that first job that I had where I was working at technical support, they taught us on the job. They sent us to online courses where we could learn HTML and CSS. From there, I enrolled in a couple of courses to develop my expertise further. So I took a course on Ruby on Rails back when that was the flavor du jour for building web applications. I took a JavaScript course. So a little bit of formal education just to get off the ground. And then since there, I'd say I'm just a very self taught hobbyist web
Mm.
developer.
Yeah, I feel like it's basically a superpower, right? Because with this skill set, you could go into any generic SaaS and work as like a normal product marketing manager. But then you also have the skill of being super niche down and interfacing directly with engineers. So I was wondering, how is this knowledge, technical knowledge, helping you empathize with engineers and also with your customers?
Oh, absolutely. So I should introduce actually where I'm working now. So I'm currently working as the like founding product marketing manager, a very small startup called Warp.
Hmm.
And Warp is engineering led company. There are like 35 engineers on the team. I was the first full-time marketing hire and have been the only one for a long time. But they are building a new terminal application. So the terminal, if you're not familiar, is the application. Chris, have you used this before? The terminal on your computer?
Yeah, I tried some
Right.
HTML, CSS, not on the Mac, just normal programming tools online, browser based.
Okay, programming tools online. So if you're a developer of any kind or an engineer, there's this program that comes on every computer called the terminal that you use to interface with your machine.
Hmm.
And it basically hasn't been updated in 40 years. Everybody has to use it. It's where you run your Git workflows, you check your logs. If you have to migrate a database, you're probably using this tool. And it's like a rite of passage for people to have to fumble over the terminal. Like I definitely early on when I was working tech support, sometimes I would have to debug an email server that fell over or something and I had to use the terminal. I was very scared I was going to run the wrong command and just break everything. So the team at Warp, they saw this really hard to use tool that every software engineer is using for hours every day, and they wanted to modernize it and make it a better experience. So what we're building is a modern, very fast Rust-based terminal application. It has AI integration and it also has collaborative features, which is really groundbreaking. There's never been like collaboration
Hmm.
alongside the command line before. So this is the product. And so when we're talking about developers and customers and the empathy for them, there's certainly like a common ground that I can start on to say, okay, I know enough about what your life is like as a developer and using this tool that I can at least start to have the conversation
Hmm.
with you. I know some of the pains, but there's this huge gap also. Like my knowledge of the terminal and programming is very shallow. And so there is a lot that I have to learn about the use cases, really deep things that people are doing with the terminal that I would never even know you can do. That's the challenge of my role right now is just closing that gap, learning,
Yeah,
learning everything
yeah,
there is to know about it.
cool. So, what do you love about working with developers as an audience?
I think partially it's just close to home for me. I am married to a staff software engineer
Uh-huh.
who has been a developer for many more than 10 years. I think he was building websites back when people used Adobe Flash. And so developers are the nerds in my life. They're like the people that I love. And I understand that feeling of you get up every day, sometimes you feel like a genius, sometimes you feel like the dumbest person in the world. You have all of this pressure to push out new features against these unreasonable deadlines that come out of nowhere. Sometimes it's 12-hour days to get something in and you're on call at night if something breaks. Like I just that lifestyle of kind of the ownership of a product and really engineers are the people who take the ideas from our minds and build them into tools that we can use every day. So I just have an enormous amount of respect for the people that do this work. Um, on top of that, I've worked alongside a lot of engineers as well. And so seeing the way that teams work in real life, yeah, it really gives me a good place to start in terms of empathy and
Mm,
sympathy and understanding and connection.
yeah, I can feel the passion bursting through you. I have a question. Have you ever used your husband as a sounding board for messaging?
Oh my gosh, 100%. So I was thinking about this morning that like not everybody has like a focus group for their ideal customer profile like in their house, right? And just yesterday, we do a lot of this at work where we poll our customers and get their opinion,
Hmm.
engage them in the process before we execute on marketing. And a member of my team was very smartly polling the community. I'll try to set this up. So we're planning a big launch. We're creating a custom sticker pack that's gonna be like a prize thank you for people who join the launch moment to commemorate it. And one of the stickers, we wanted to make this little joke. It's a little terminal and it has this command on it, which is like sudo remove recursive with force. It's like a command that basically nukes your machine.
Yeah,
It
well,
like will delete all of the files on your computer.
yeah.
And then the joke is like we had this little bit of test that said, make your computer faster. And we were trying to determine, okay, is this a funny joke to have this sticker with this very dangerous command on it that like most experienced engineers will know not to run? And yes, make your computer faster by making it not have anything to run. People think this is cute and funny and they'll want to put it on their machines. And that's a fun way to get warp out in the wild. Or people hate us because they're going to run this command not knowing what it is and completely mess
Hmm.
up their machine. And then like we burn all the brand trust. So the team was running some polls on Twitter and TikTok. Hey, should we mass print these stickers? And even before we were getting responses back from customers and our persona in real life, my husband comes in the room and he's, if you're going to mass print those, you need to put a not safe for work warning on it. I was like,
Good call.
yes. So unfortunately, yeah, very unfortunately for him and our partnership, the work and life are
Yeah,
very integrated. I'm often going to him to be like, does this make sense?
love
Is
it.
this headline scammy? What do you think?
Yeah, I love it. And also, it's great because with your knowledge, you have probably a sense at least of the kind of language, or at least to get a like an 80% close to the language that your audience uses, right?
I think this is a constant challenge. This is part of the job, is
Mm.
getting the language right with what the audience uses.
Yeah, yeah. So, so what do you do to stay in touch with them? You mentioned polling customers, but what else in general?
Yeah, absolutely. So I am a huge fan of this like customer-led growth framework where everything is totally focused on voice of customer. And so I am basically constantly talking to developers, both users of Warp and people I'd like to use Warp who aren't using Warp. and listening. So we have integrations where things like every response to a tweet from our brand comes through a Slack channel, and I'm looking at those every day. Every response on a welcome or onboarding email is coming into our inboxes, and we're looking at those every day. We are doing one of those traditional net promoter score surveys. Would you
Mhm.
recommend Warp to a friend? And all of those responses are coming through in Slack every day. And so I'm constantly just listening, looking for the words that people are using, and then trying to take those phrases and put them back on the marketing material. So you create this loop where we're taking the words from the customers inspired by their genuine reactions. We're putting those out in the market. And then hopefully, if it lands, people are saying those words right back to us.
Hmm. Nice. Yeah, I love it. Yeah, it's super important, especially because market changes, trends move, and also some competitors might pop up. So yeah, it's always important to stay in touch, update your language, update your knowledge about your audience. So that's really good. I read somewhere that you mentioned when it comes to some of the work that you do, you mentioned that you try to scale without losing the company's soul in the process. What do you mean by that?
Oh, wow. I feel like this is absolutely the challenge at so many different businesses is how do you scale without losing the soul of the company? I'll try to distill this down. So, one pattern, this is not happening where I'm working now, to be fair. Where,
Hmm.
if anything, I think we're being very cautious about scale at work. It's growing very healthily, but we're not quite at this phase that
Hmm.
this phrase makes me think about. But I worked at very many companies where, as you start to grow, there becomes a lot of external pressure to move up market to realize returns. And I think people get, especially dev tool companies, we get really nervous about selling to CTOs or
Hmm.
selling to a senior VP, engineering manager. And we start to lose touch with the fact that the most powerful people at enterprise companies are still humans. They're still people. And so all of a sudden, the marketing starts to be speaking more to analysts than to customers and more to this fake, scary CTO in our
The
brains
persona,
than the
yeah.
real person that you're going to meet if you go sit down in their office. And alongside that, I think there's also just the UX neglect that can happen as you're scaling. You prioritize different things and you lose the little experiences, the little niceties, the little Easter eggs that made people love your product to begin with. So, yeah, always a challenge to help keep the culture of a company intact, keep the customer experience for a company intact as you're going out and bringing in the $1 million
Mm.
deals.
Yeah, yeah. When it comes to having making sure that the customer's voice comes through and is consistent, what do you do to try and advocate for them? I know that you worked at Full Story, which is a product marketing analytics tool. So you obviously have a lot of knowledge about what happened inside the product. You probably got in touch with a lot of customers. So yeah, what do you do to advocate for them?
Oh, yeah, sure. Okay. So, a little bit about Full Story. It's been a long time since I've been at Full Story. I know the company has changed a lot over even just the last couple of years. Being early on at that company was so magical. Everybody at that company, when I joined, there were maybe 50 people. Every single person was just obsessed. Like people say like customer experience obsessed. Like they really meant it. Like they really like every conversation sometimes was not necessarily very pragmatic, but like how do we make this the best possible experience? And there were certainly moments along the way where yeah, we had to face operational things and think, okay, what is actually going to cause too much friction? What is actually going to be confusing? And advocating for changes, not always successfully, honestly. Sometimes just trade offs had to happen and things would get weird. But at a very practical level, I think where I am now, the ways that I'm advocating for customer experience are little things like defending the words that I'm going to put on a new products page because I know they came out of the mouth of somebody. I think they'll be clear. Or I spend a lot of time actually, and this is not typical product marketing behavior, but looking at the error messages in our application, looking at the new designs for new features, There's this balance of how do we make it simple and clean and don't put too much on the page. Developers love their terminals to be very clean,
Mm.
no padding, very conservative, but also clear. Is this error message clear enough? Are we telling users not just what error is coming from the computer, but what action you can take to overcome it? I think that's really like where my advocacy shows up is in these little details when we're shipping new things. Is it clear enough? Is it documented well? Are we using our customers' words to describe it?
Yeah, that's great. I also really the fact that you also have this user experience design skill set. So where does that come from? You got the coding, you got the marketing, you got the user experience. Where does it come from?
Yes. Okay. So I'm a little bit self conscious to speak to this, but I think deep down inside of me, there's somebody who very deeply wishes they could be a product manager instead of a product marketing manager.
Ah,
Like,
okay.
I very much wish that I could be designing the user experience for everything. I think about our marketing site as a product that has its own user experience that needs to be managed. And there was a time in my career where I really believed that I was going to switch parts of the house. Like I was going to these coding boot camps because I wanted to be technical enough that I could get a role in product
Mm,
management instead of sitting in the marketing department. And alongside that, I went through several UX courses formally. Went through a coaching course with somebody who's well known in the field and with tons of workshops, like the types of workshops where you're just sitting in a room moving Post-it notes around or drawing wireframes of like new software on paper and on whiteboards. And I love that type of work. It's not very often that I'm doing that type of work in my day to day anymore. But I think that time that I spent was not completely wasted because it does mean that when we're designing a new marketing site page, I have opinions about how it shows up. I'm going to have opinions about if you're trying to put a carousel on the page. And all of that comes from that time and that research I did when I was trying and failing to make that career pivot early on.
no, that's great because I'm like in the same position because as a conversion copywriter, not a lot of
Mhm.
copywriters include UX design as well, which is a lot of what I do. I used to work at a help bootstrap, a usability testing startup. So I used to run
Yeah.
thousands of usability tests every day. And one thing that I really pay attention to when I write copy for a homepage or product page or whatever, it's also the user experience of a visitor landing on the website, right? How they consume the copy, how they go through the visuals, plus the copy, plus the social proof. So all that it's like a
Yes.
holistic view. And looking at Warp's website, I really appreciated the fact that you look at it and you feel like you are inside terminal, right? It's very like super minimal, the
Mhm.
colors, it's very dev oriented. And I was wondering,
Yeah.
did you have a say in that, or
Mm.
was it done before you got there? How did it work?
Yeah, yeah, I'd say that most of the things you're seeing on the Work website today they predate me. The website is a Webflow site. It was built before I joined the team. And while I've made some changes and updates to the messaging on it and shipped a few new pages recently, a
Uh-huh.
lot of it predates me and really comes from the genius mind of the head of growth, original head of growth, one of the early founding members of the company at work. The first engineer is Michelle Lynn. Genius. But the brand is currently undergoing just like spoiler, we're doing a ton of work to update the brand this year, and there's gonna be an entire new version of this website in a few months, I believe.
Uh,
And it's interesting what's gonna pull through and what won't. I think that since that you're inside the terminal and the product is front and center is probably gonna stay. That's a really big tenet of the way we think about marketing to developers is to show off the product, and the more that we can make it move and show how tactile it is, the better that people are gonna understand what this is.
yeah, I was speaking last week with someone who works at Interactive Demo SaaS. So they basically make interactive demos for SaaS, and they just released a report that goes through how much of an increase in click-through rate people get using interactive demos compared to walkthrough videos,
Mm.
explainer videos. So yeah, having the product, especially for an audience of developers, is probably the best move that you could ever have done, right?
Yeah. Oh, that's so funny that I'm so split on the interactive demo thing.
Mhm.
It's funny, when I worked at Full Story, one of my like many failed projects that I couldn't convince anybody to greenlight was like, I wanted to build an interactive demo. I wanted to call it the Omni Deck. And it was going to be like, you jump into a Full Story account, but all the data's there for you. Because one of the things about Full Story, because it's an analytics tool, you have to install JavaScript on your
Yeah.
website before anything happens. So the activation, very high friction activation, especially for teams that didn't have access to Google Tag Manager or something. And I was like, oh, if they could just see how it works and click around, dummy data,
Mm.
then they'd be motivated to activate their account or start a trial or whatever. I'm really glad in hindsight that nobody let me waste my time building that. I think there are so many tools out there right now with the interactive demo, and it's really not that much better than a walk me tutorial. It's like fake and it has the little
Mm.
call out blurbs on the side. You get dragged through the
Yeah.
UI and sure, maybe it helps. Maybe the data says that it helps with conversion rates. If I have somebody's attention long enough that I could have them walking through a walk me of fake data, I'd almost rather have them inspired to download it and use the app instead,
Mm.
especially for a product like Warp, where the setup is, I really, that's what makes it different. I think those tools work really well if it's a super complex onboarding and there's a barrier to the magic.
Mm.
The coolest thing about Warp is you open it and yeah, we're going to ask you a million questions about who you are. Sorry, not my idea. We'll ask you a bunch of questions. And then when you get on the command line, as soon as you type your first command, you get it.
Yeah.
Like you're understanding what it says. So different strokes, different folks, different companies.
Yeah, of course. I think it probably also depends on considering the audience's awareness and sophistication,
Mhm.
right? Because if maybe you show
Absolutely.
a demo that looks a bit like the product, but it's not exactly like the product to a developer who wants like the thing, yeah,
Yeah.
you might lose credibility, right? But if on the other hand you have an interactive demo for a marketer or someone else, maybe for them it's good enough.
100%. And this is something we talk about this at Warp a lot internally because it's hard to get the full team aligned on
Mm.
this. But on the marketing site, we're typically using stylized renderings of the product where we're pulling away most of the UI clutter so that you can focus on the action and understand the feature.
Hmm.
As we get deeper in the awareness and learning funnel for the lead or the site visitor, we're trying to give them higher and higher fidelity versions of the product so that they build trust and they understand that this is not vaporware. So, like the next thing, like if we get your attention with the stylized version, the next thing we want to show you is a demo that's more educational. That's like literally just the screen, so you can see and you know what you're about to download. And that goes all the way through. By the time you get to the technical documentation, I mean, it really is a completely accurate rendering. We're not doing any magic to obscure how it works because we want you to see it in its entirety. And finding that balance, helping people understand here we need a super high fidelity version of the product because it has to communicate and be educational versus this is for an ad and we have 200 pixels.
Yeah,
It can only have this much. Yeah.
yeah. How do you think about that? Do you map the customer journey and then decide, okay, here we're this demo, here we're gonna have this other step, or
It's a good question. I have worked in companies where we have had really beautiful customer journey artifacts, and there may or may not be a couple of abandoned Fig Gem files somewhere in the ether at work where I think many people at work have probably attempted to cut the map out the customer journey at one point or another. We do have a team-wide accepted artifact for this that I think is pretty strong, but it's very high level, basically covering the awareness and the education, the activation with the product, and the flywheel. And then the flywheel has both part of the journey is that if you love the product, you refer it to your friends. Part of the journey is that if you love the product, you might use this at work and invite your team at work. So we have a very high level customer journey map that I think we can point to as a team to get aligned,
mm.
but maybe not the level of granular. Like at Full Story, because we had Full Story, when we were talking about the customer journey, we literally knew every path that somebody would take before they hit the trial button. This is a different thing at Warp. We're very hands off with the data. And so it's much more high level.
Yeah, and I think it speaks to the fact that sometimes, like at certain points, you have to connect the dots. And especially if you know the audience, sometimes you don't really need
Right.
like the 1,000 KPIs, metrics. If you know your audience and you're regularly in touch with them, you are probably able to connect the dots and intuitively know where to put what in the customer journey, right?
Yeah, it's interesting. So there's a couple of places I can think of a couple of examples where the dots are not connected, but we've made assumptions. So,
Mm.
like, one of those, for example, is the Warp team. So, before I joined, I was the first, like, official marketer at Warp, but truly, like, the team was doing marketing very well before I joined. And there is a woman named Jess at Warp who runs TikTok and YouTube and is like the face of Warp. And those social channels where she's out there educating people, showing off the demo are just growing, growing. We cannot measure. We don't have any way to connect the dots right now to really measure and know whether people who watch those videos are downloading the product. The attribution is just too murky. We sometimes get self-reported attribution, like in user interviews, people will tell me, oh yeah, I learned about it on YouTube. Or when someone signs up, they fill out the form and that's what they remember. But it's very so we're making assumption that there's a dot connect there. Okay, if
Yeah.
we invest in this channel and create content that's entertaining and educational and people love, we will trust that will eventually translate into web traffic and into downloads,
Mm-mm.
even if we can't really see how often it's happening directly that way. That's
Yeah.
just okay. The other one that's like this is if you notice on the Warp website, one of the bets we took this summer was an experiment to add a call to action CTA where we're telling you to install it with Brew. So, like when you're on Mac and you can use Homebrew, and that's a way that you can also install products. And so we said, okay, based on some voice of customer, like a friend of mine who is a developer said, you know what? I honestly just wish that you made this bigger, that you could teach people that it's so easy to install by Brew.
Mm.
That should be your primary CTA or at least like a strong secondary. Try that. So we did that based on engineering feedback and it was really murky. Like, honestly, there were conversations even recently about whether or not it was working because, like, at first we saw that the signups looked good, but we couldn't track it because they're running the command on the
Yeah.
command line. It's not like a button click. So it's okay, I think it's working. And then there were moments where we're like, oh no, maybe it actually tanked. And then we zoomed out and it was like, oh yeah, actually the sign up rate did get better after that change. But sometimes you just have to, yeah, like trust the feedback and hopefully you will see something in the numbers, but it is more tea leaves. It's not a perfect science.
Yeah, of course. I was interesting when you mentioned the website redesign. Speaking of
Mhm.
sensing the market, sensing customers, what usually prompts a website redesign?
What usually prompts a website redesign? I think in marketing, it's tempting to redesign the website. Anytime a new hire comes on board, somebody wants to redo the website.
Really?
Anytime you launch a new feature, somebody wants to redo the website. It is something that you can just constantly be relaunching your website every couple of months, forever. Yeah, it's not always motivated by the website isn't working. I think sometimes it's we have a new story we need to tell. We have a new story we need to tell, and we need to update the website to go tell that new story. Or it could be, yeah, we have a new brand that we need to express. And so we're going to update the entire look and feel of the website to be
Mm.
different.
Do you look at competitors as well?
I have worked at companies in the past where competitive analysis was a much more involved part of the product marketing responsibility. At Warp, our true competitors are incumbent tools. If you are downloading Warp for Mac, your competitor is the terminal that is installed on your machine for free, or maybe iTerm 2. And those products are very different from Warp. They're totally free. Sometimes the competitor is an open source product. So we are watching our competitors and other similar copycat tools that pop up in the space very closely, taking inspiration where appropriate. But more than anything, I think we're relying on customer feedback and our own gut instincts about what's going to land with our audience more than what worked for somebody else in our space.
Yeah, yeah, makes sense. I read somewhere that especially when it comes to speaking with customers and researching speaking with customers, you had a very interesting take, which I always try to tell my clients as well, which is that people don't always do what they say. So what do you mean by that?
Yeah.
And what do you recommend people doing if they cannot trust what people say?
Yes. Okay. So this is a very UXC kind of platitude kind of thing. But One of the things that was confirmed for me when I was working in a space where I had a lot of product analytics data is that people's memory of their experience, and this honestly, this goes back to tech support too. Like
Mm.
when I was working in tech support early in my career, before we had tools like Full Story to watch how people were interacting with the product, you only had the word of the person for what they clicked and what happened and what error they got. And often, what my job was early on, I don't have to do this anymore. It's not necessarily required as much, but it was to get on a Zoom, or before Zoom, we use like WebEx or something. Get on a call and say, prove to me what you did. Share your screen. Often I'm teaching people how to download the software to share their screen. Share your screen and show me what you clicked because I need to understand what you actually did to get this error. And of course, many times when you're walking through somebody without somebody, you can't replicate it. Like, is that, oh, like as soon as somebody wants to look, it can't happen anymore. And that happens to me all the time too, even with Warp when I'm trying to be like, I ran into a bug and I can't replicate it. So you would file the ticket as can't reproduce and then wait until 100 other people had the same problem. What happened when I started to get access to tools like Full Story was people would write in and be like, something broke. And then I could hit the session and be like, oh, yeah, I can see exactly what happened. You clicked this, you did this, and you got this error message. And I've already filed the bug report for you, and it'll be fixed next Tuesday. The same thing happens in marketing where people don't remember they don't remember the first time they really heard about you. They don't remember which campaign they saw, whether it was a newsletter or they saw you at a conference. And so you get these kind of weird half truths, which are like whatever is in their mind is the thing that they remember the most.
Yeah,
But
they
we
make
don't
it.
really know.
Yeah, they turn it
Yeah.
into a truth.
Where that fit in the story. And so there's a certain truth to it because that's the thing you remember, that's the thing you feel comfortable telling me. We should do more of that thing.
Mm.
It's not that it's not actionable feedback, but it's not always the most complete picture.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, what I usually recommend clients as well is first, like you cannot like dive into interviews, qualitative data. You should first narrow down and pinpoint through quantitative data and then use the qualitative data to assess the whole situation, right?
See, would do it the opposite.
Yeah.
And the reason why is because I think we're really bad at tagging things for analytics. So if you start with the qualitative data, you might uncover, I don't want to say the word blind spots, but
Might
you
be
might
flawed.
uncover parts of your funnel that you're not even measuring because it wasn't your intention when you designed it.
Mm.
But you certainly need both. If you do not have both of those things together, you are operating on gut feel.
Yeah, for sure. Awesome. Let me see. There was another great point that you had that might be controversial. I wanted to ask you. It's you wrote somewhere on Twitter, I think, that about having designers, product people write the first draft of copy. Sometimes it can work
Mm.
better. And I'm super curious because a lot of times, okay, they might know the product a bit better. They might know some of the language as well better than you. But what about, for example, when it comes to hit specific pain points or problems or motivations that you know from marketing research are important to hit and your developers maybe are not aware of?
I think this is just like product management philosophy in general. And maybe speaking a little bit to some of the situations that I've seen
Mm.
at work. But a really good product team, a really good product manager, a really good product designer, they are going to explore the customer pain points as they are validating developing a solution and building a feature. And so often I am relying on that PRD, that design doc, that thing that's in the engineer and product team's head about why they're building what they're building to understand what the message should be, what the product should be to begin with. And if that backstory work has not been done, there is no amount of marketing spin that I can put on the feature
Mm.
to make it valuable
Yeah.
to a user. Like you have to start by identifying a real pain point. And I think it's so tempting sometimes, especially in space, everything moving so fast with AI and like engineers. You go out, you see somebody ship a new widget, you go out to dinner, you see your friend, their company just ship whatever. You assume that all of those things are working at those companies and you want to copy it and you don't go back to the beginning of, okay, what actually is the root of the pain?
Mm.
And we get caught up in these cycles where we're shipping things, but we don't remember why. So I think forcing the product team or asking, requiring, counting on the product team to do that writing first helps make product better. And then it's very easy for me to come on and say, okay, you're trying to call it this that actually has an explicit meaning. We should rename it. Or this isn't clear. Based on my research, I think the name needs to be shorter, whatever it is. The headline needs to be snappier. All of those things are easier when it starts on something that's
Mm.
really true and well supported with research.
Yeah. Do you think that the product teams, when you ask them to do this writing, do they see it as extra work, or are they actually happy to contribute?
Oh, I hope not. I do think sometimes in real life, we get the process a little bit backwards. Sometimes we're moving so fast and we know that something is the right thing to do. That sometimes we have to go back and do things in a different order.
Yeah.
But I hope that the team does not see it as extra work. I should ask them and make sure that they're
Awesome, awesome. You mentioned learning and conferences and courses and workshops. Where do you go
Mhm.
to learn? What's your strategy for learning?
Oh my gosh. We have to constantly be learning. I think my learning strategy right now is very multi-layered. So I'm bucketing a certain amount of time to read. Every morning I open my inbox and read like several newsletters like TLDR, Console. I subscribe to as many engineering newsletters, Linux, like the FOSS newsletter, like anything that I can read that I think my audience may be reading. I start my morning by reading those things.
Mm,
So I'm kicking off as I'm going through my inbox every morning, just trying to stay in touch with the information that I think my audience cares about. On top of that, I try to put myself in conference spaces where there are engineers present. So, like Render Atlanta is a huge engineering conference. It's more like a festival than a conference, I
mhm,
think they would say, in Atlanta every summer. And I'm just going and I'm trying to absorb. I'm sitting in sessions about how to be a good engineering manager, how to solve certain technical problems. I'm learning about engineers' career paths, how they network, what success looks like for them, and just being a fly on the wall, trying
mm.
to learn as much as I can about what their world feels like. Yeah, so lots of reading, lots of putting myself in context. And then I think the really hard part, the part that gets neglected, is just actually getting in the code, like getting in the terminal, trying to go through the Docker tutorial, like really forcing myself to go through the experience exactly like an engineer would.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. What's your take on communities like, I don't know, Slack groups, LinkedIn? Do you use it also for networking, learning, or do you see it as a bit crowded and sometimes it's a pitch fest as well?
Yeah, yeah. So there's at least one developer marketing community that I'm in that I find to be very lively and moderated, where there's a lot of value. It's a pitch fest, but it's also super fun to just jump in and like commiserate. Oh my gosh, I've got a surprise launch I have to run next week. Or, oh my gosh, I'm beating my head against the wall with my email marketing tool. Is anybody else having this problem? Like, I love those types of Slack spaces where you can get in and just share.
Mm,
I've been advised not to participate in some of the formal certification programs for product marketing. I think I've talked to several very senior people who were, at your
interesting.
stage, probably don't need to jump into that. But I think those courses can be really useful if you are trying to make a transition early on
Uh,
and you're looking for credibility, especially if you're going into a larger org. It's a little bit different at tiny startups, but
mm,
if you're trying to get like an associate product marketing job at a FANG company or a big corporate company, I think there's a lot of value in those little
mm.
courses and everything from the indie courses from somebody who's just a thought leader in the space that you can learn from, formalized mentorship kind of thing, formalized like advisor to the PMA certifications that you can go through if you want, Pragmatic Institute,
Yeah.
etc.
Yeah, maybe smaller startups want to see that you're more on stuff that you actually do rather than just read and consume.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I hope so. It's nice that those templates exist and that sometimes you can go grab like the canonical
Yeah.
messaging map. But at a day-to-day, I think like shipping the messaging on the website, my team's probably annoyed that I even have a draft in a Google Doc or a Google Sheet. Getting it live is way more important than having the perfect
Yeah, yeah,
frameworks and everything behind the scenes. Yeah.
totally. Last couple of questions. What's your biggest challenge right now as far as messaging? And if you were to advise someone on how to solve it, what would you tell them?
Oh, I love this. Okay, I'll tell you my biggest challenge and how the advice I'm giving myself how to solve it. My biggest challenge right now is we're about to do a huge launch with a website update and I need a new headline. And even though I'm a pretty strong technical writer, I'm not a snappy copywriter for headlines and taglines. So the way that I'm giving myself advice to solve this is I've done a workshop with the team to gather ideas. I am going to make a call on 2 different headlines that are strategically aligned with what we need to do as business, but that neither of us strongly feel one way or the other, that one's better than the other. And I'm going to mock them up. So I'll hack the DOM. I'll put the headline in the header, take a screenshot, and then I'm going to run like traditional user interviews
Nice.
with a couple of real users and a couple of people I wish were users and say, what comes up for you when you see these?
Yeah, yeah.
What questions do you have? And then use that qualitative research from the focus group to make a call and what's on the page.
So extra question. Have you ever
Yeah.
tried or use usability testing for messaging? I know that it's probably hard to
Mhm.
find the specific audience, but have you?
Yeah, absolutely. In a past life, I've been really happy with tools like user interviews where you can say, okay, I'm looking for a bunch of engineers that are at this level in the United States and getting on a call with them to test messaging and like clarity around things has been really helpful. So absolutely, I would recommend that. And
Mhm.
whether or not I use a formal tool or not, I'll definitely be conducting user interviews for this
Mhm.
project.
Awesome. All right, last question. I did some stalking and I saw that we have two things in common. One is fog. I saw that where you live, there's a lot of fog. And because where the
Yeah.
place where I'm from in Italy, it's like a swamp, so there's a lot of fog.
Ah,
The other thing that we have in common is handcrafted vision boards. I'm looking at mine right now, and
yes.
I wanted to ask, what's the last thing that you added to your vision board?
Oh, okay. So my vision board, I think I also shared this on Twitter. This year, my vision board is all about fire.
Mm,
I feel like the last couple of years with COVID and just I don't know work being really hard and stuff going on in my personal life, I got super burned out, which I feel like is just trite to even say because burnout happens so much in SaaS. But like literally, I went to try to get diagnosed for something, and they were like, "Oh, this is a thing called burnout. Have you considered resting?"
like,
And so I feel like this year, I'm like, I want my fire back. I want my energy.
yeah.
Everything is about fire. And what's awesome about that is like, I literally put all this fire on my vision board. And then the next week I was in Colorado and my hotel room at this resort had a fireplace in it. And I was like, it's the manifesting is happening. I'm bringing the fire. It's showing up.
Awesome, love it. So you do themed vision boards like every year? What is it? How often?
Yeah.
Ah,
Word of the year, word of the
nice.
quarter, all of those things.
Love it. All right. Thank you so much, Melanie. It's been awesome. People can find you on LinkedIn and obviously they can check out warp.dev. Anywhere else that you might want
That's
to
right.
point people to? All
Oh,
right.
yeah. No, I'm easy to find online. I have a website at melaniecrissey.com. You can find me on LinkedIn, Twitter, or at warp.dev.
Awesome. Thank you so much and chat soon. Thank you so much for listening to the pod. I hope you enjoyed the episode. If you did, the best thing you could do to support the show and help me as a small business owner would be to leave a review. Head over to Apple Podcasts or Spotify and let me know what you think. If you don't want to miss future episodes, subscribe, and if you have any feedback, questions, or suggestions for future episodes, just hit me up on LinkedIn at Christopher Silvestri or Twitter at SilvestriChris. Speak to you next time.